Hi everyone, welcome to today's short webinar session on formal reviews and appraisal, and it's still aimed at middle managers. The format today is slightly different because I forgot to record the live webinar on Thursday, hence I'm doing a brief presentation today. So for the next 20 to 25 minutes, we're going to be looking at performance management rating system, formal reviews, grader biases, and identifying talent for leadership. There's not going to be any question and answer session at the end. My name is Marie-Claude Boucher, and I work as a leadership coach for aspiring leaders, first-time leaders, team leaders, and middle management. I'm also carrying lots of professional assessments like 360 assessment and Hogan personality assessments, as well as MBTI personal assessments. And I also work with personal coaching focused on mental well-being and building resilience. So that's me in a nutshell, and all my contact details will be on the last slide of the presentation. So let's go into the topic and let's have a look at where we are today in the performance management life cycles. So this is the 5th webinar of a series about performance management, and today we are exploring the midpoint review and the end of cycle review. So we're looking at mid-year reviews, and we are looking at end of year reviews or appraisals. So again, when we go through this process, I need you to think with two hats. So your hat as a manager and the tasks you need to perform with each team member, and also that of an individual being assessed, working for a company and being assessed and going through the performance management process. So some of the key leadership skills that you will be developing if you're doing this well as a manager, so are the following. So we're looking at courage, planning, motivation, persuasion, shaping behaviors, systemic thinking, honesty, decision-making, career management, people development, and trust. Before we go into the topic of reviews and appraisal, they are an area of leadership and management where you cannot be complacent. The topics of reviews and appraisal, you need to devote a lot of time, energy, and attention, because they are very, very sensitive areas, as they are often linked to bonuses and job promotion, and sometimes exit strategies as well. Okay, so that's really, really important that you keep that in mind and that you devote your full attention to those reviews. I want to do a short review before we dive into the topic of performance management systems and rating systems. I want to do a short review of some of the key points that we talked about in the previous 4 webinars. Yeah, because when you're carrying out those formal reviews, there should be no surprises. Yeah, if you're a really good manager, there are no surprises during those formal reviews, because you have, from the beginning of the year, you have set smart objectives that are linked to the overall strategy of your business. You have put development plans and stretch assignments in place for your team members. And most importantly, you have practiced continuous coaching and feedback, and you have kept logs of you have kept records of all those meetings that you had with your team members. And when I say keeping logs, what I mean by that, you either have a notebook where you put your notes, or even better, you have a Word document where you keep those records, or you have logged them into your performance management or your talent management system. Yeah, so you're practicing continuous coaching and feedback throughout the year, and you're keeping logs on those. And then you have regular, you've had regular valuable structures one-on-one meetings. And there is a whole worksheet in the members area on how to conduct those valuable and structured one-on-one meetings and making them count. And also I want you to keep an eye on the website, because soon I'm going to share with you via another webinar some agile ways to help you manage these meetings better. And you also have practice continuous recognition and appreciation throughout the year. So when I say that, it means that you understand and you use the reward and recognition systems that are in place in your organization. And most importantly, you understand and you have cascaded down the rating vignettes, your rating system to your employees at the beginning of the year. And those vignettes are often based on competencies or job performance scales. I'm just going to show you some examples here. When I talk about vignettes, what I mean is scales. You know, what are you measuring? How are you measuring performance in your organization? So it's important that you remember your two hats, yeah? Your hat as a manager and your hat as an employee. So it's important when you go through formal reviews that you understand the expectations for yourself in terms of your objectives, but also for your team members, and that your team members are clear on what they are being measured against. Okay, so here are some general examples of some of those systems that you might have in your organization. The one here is a general behavior definition on a scale of 1 to 5. Some companies will have scales of 1 to 3, 1 to 4, 1 to 10. It depends, and usually there's kind of general behaviors defined. Other businesses might have more complex definition based on specific competencies. And you've got a lot of different examples of expected behaviors associated to a specific competency, or some might use job performance scales with a tick box exercise. So the first thing you really need to understand is what applies to you in your organizations. And you need to be transparent with this, because formal reviews and appraisal, they can be really emotionally charged conversations. So being clear from the start of what the rating system is, it can be really, really useful. Once you've understood how you're being measured, you need to look into a little bit more details at the rating system and see what your company is doing. Are they using a simple or a weighted average? And are they using an absolute or a comparative rating? So what I mean by that is, if, for instance, you're using a simple average, it means if you have, like, let's say 5 objectives, you do the total for each objectives and you divide by 5, and that's fine. And that's your average number. If you have a weighted average, you just need to pay attention to those categories that are weighted higher. So for instance, if you're working in finance, for instance, if we look here, we can see that accuracy and attention to detail, as well as timelines, carry a little bit more weight than just understanding a task and objectives. So really try to find out, you know, when you're doing your assessments, when you're sharing the vignette, that you can explain to your team members, you know, what kind of average is used in your organization. And then also, when you're doing your rating, you have to understand for yourself as a manager, and you have to explain as well to your team members whether you're using an absolute system or a comparative rating. So absolute system is it's quite simple. At the end of the day, let me give you an example. So if you have a team of 10 people and you decide that those 10 people all score a 4 at the end of the year on a scale of 1 to 5, and every single one scores a 4, then that's it. They all have a 4, and you all give them a 4, and everybody's happy. By the way, if you do that as a manager, that would be very bad, because you probably would have some biases, or you're probably not being extremely good at doing your job and doing performance management. But that's an absolute system. If you are using a comparative system, depending on your organization, and most organizations with over 150, 200 people, employees tend to use a comparative rating, which is something like this, where you are forced to distribute people on a curve. So usually people are asked to put 70% of their people as average performers, 20% as top performers, and 10% as non-performers. That's typical in most big corporations to have those systems in place. There are some advantages because it's easy to identify top performers that way. However, there are some inconveniences as well, where you are being forced to put people who maybe you classify as average into a non-performing category, which might have some serious implications further down the line. Okay, so try to understand, do you have something that's absolute, whatever you give is whatever they have, or do you have to compare your team members with maybe other team members and maybe other teams as well? Okay. But what is really important is also for you as a manager to understand all the implications that the ratings mean. So when I say implications, I'm talking about all the policies that are associated to ranking, such as bonuses, promotions, compensation, exit strategies. And you also need to understand, when we talk about those rating system and performance management system, you also need to understand the approval process and workflow and all the forms that are in use. Okay. One thing that I really, really want to emphasize on is it's something that's really, really important, especially with a forced system like this one, where you are forced to place people on a curve. And what is really important is to have defined success criteria and smart objectives, from the start. Otherwise, you are opening yourself to potential lawsuits. So you really need at the beginning of the year to have something that's really clear, and your employee needs to be really clear about how they're being measured and what are the measures of success. So when it comes to formal reviews, they are an important part of the whole performance management system. They are the 2 reviews that are compulsory and that you will need to enter in the performance management system that you have in place in your organization. So they are well documented, and both parties come prepared to those formal reviews with documentation. And before we go into more details about those reviews, I want to just think about the mindset for a moment. So to go into a formal review, you need to have a mindset that is of open communication. So we're talking about two-way discussions here. And as I said before, there's no surprises. And the reason why there are no surprises during those reviews, it's because as a manager, you have done informal performance management throughout the whole year. So you have done your coaching, your feedback, your reward and recognition, and you've documented everything throughout the year. So there are no surprises. And the mindset is also about asking questions rather than just giving answers and passing judgment. It's about giving support, and it's about guiding people and getting out of the way. So really, if you think about the media review, the first one, it's also a chance to recalibrate, meaning to review the SMART objectives that you set up at the beginning of the year and to check whether they are still valid and relevant. And also to remind people about the rating system at the end of the year and, you know, to make sure you clarify everything about the scales and the definitions and all those things if they have any questions. So mid-years, very, very important because it's, you know, how are you doing at the moment? How are things? Do we need to work on the objectives a little bit? Do we need to tweak them? And it's important, it's very, very important to do that at the mid-year point, because at the end of the year, you don't want to evaluate someone on something that they haven't been able to deliver because of some circumstances that were not planned. So if you think about last year, was a very good example. In January, February, people set up objectives, managers set up objectives for their team members. And those objectives probably around work projects and impact on the business with clear measures of success. And that was kind of coming out in January, February. And then the health crisis happened and everything closed down. And then if you go through the media review and you don't review those objectives, you know, what might happen towards the end of the year is that you are measuring someone on something that they haven't been able to deliver. And this is not fair. Okay, this is not a good management or leadership practice. That's why media reviews, very, very essential in recalibrating. Are we still on track? You know, are there circumstances outside of our control that might impact this objective? And it's okay to change objectives. And then at the end of your review, it's more finalizing a process, finalizing the whole year and talking about everything that's associated to giving, scoring, and putting everything under wrap for the whole year. Some of the benefits of carrying those reviews are you're helping employees and you're helping the company actually adapt to constantly changing work environment and work circumstances. And you're also you're also helping employees to develop, to grow, and most importantly, to deliver on the company's mission and the company's strategy. That's why it's so important to do them well and to take them very seriously. How to do a review, your organization should have a process in place. So you might want to check what kind of training material you might have, what kind of manager guidebook you might have to help you with how to conduct the review. But some of the key things to think about is continuous preparation. And continuous preparation is all about the continuous coaching, the continuous feedback, recording every single thing, and then some more preparation. You'll probably need to write some nice summaries and, you know, get a little bit more prep just before the review. There's also planning of logistics. You know, you need to book a room, make sure that you've got the room that's booked for enough time, and maybe add another 30 minutes on top of what you think is right. The environment, so how is the room? You know, do you have some water? Do you think you're going to have a difficult conversation, in which case you might want to have some tissues available? Sitting, try to avoid sitting opposite each other on a table, try to sit next to each other, using the table to put your documentation. And you need to send invites, you need probably to go through the system to send all those things. And when the review is about to start, don't be late. Okay, welcome the employee and explain the discussion outline. Okay, so your organization should have some recommendation about how to carry a review. I'm going to give you a very, very simple outline that you can follow that's really, really effective. And it's, as I said, it's very simple. Keep it simple. So first, you go. You as being the employee. So the employee goes first and discuss their performance. So as a manager, I'm going to stay quiet. I'm just going to listen and I'm going to ask questions to clarify. So I'm here to listen to my employees and they're telling me about their performance and how they think they have performed. Then it's me, it's my turn. As the manager, I'm going to share my inputs. So I'm going to say, yes, I agree with this. I've noticed that, and then I've noticed this, and blah, blah, blah. Giving all my examples that I have accumulated during the half year or the whole year. And then there is a discussion, which is you and me, we're talking and we're having a conversation and we're discussing and we're discussing and we're reviewing and we are agreeing on outcomes. So this is a very simple model, you, me, agree. Okay, so you listen first, then you share what you think, then you discuss and come to some kind of agreement. And then once you have discussed all your objectives and everything, you make sure you discuss the next steps. Yeah, who is going to record that in the system, who is going to send the document, what's the approval process, what are the next steps. Yeah, so as I said, it shouldn't be too complicated. If you feel overwhelmed by carrying those formal reviews, again, it's probably because you haven't put enough emphasis on the informal performance management process and the constant documentation of everything. When we are evaluating an employee's performance, there are some biases and common errors that often come into play. So it's important for a manager to be aware of these so that they can be as fair as possible. Okay, so some of those are here on the screen. So let's talk briefly through them. When we talk sometime about availability error, so we tend to emphasize information that is readily available, something that's vivid in our mind, that's very recent. So in other words, the most recent project that someone has worked on, the most recent assignment, we will remember more than the older ones. Yeah, so that's why it's important to have that continuous documentation throughout the year, so we avoid that one. Then we have something called leniency or central tendency. And that with leniency, we tend to give inflated ratings because we are reluctant to deliver bad news. We want to be liked. So, we're not managing underperformance too well. So we tend to be quite lenient with the scoring. And then it's also linked to having a central tendency where we want to play it safe and we tend to go towards the middle. We don't want to be too quick to promote and we don't want to be too harsh either. So there's sometimes this leniency or central tendency. Attribution error. So I like this one. This one is quite interesting because if we think about our own performance, we tend to attribute our poor performance on situational constraints, which are, for instance, oh yeah, I didn't do too well on this because of changes in policies, because this didn't work out quite well because there was something external to me. However, when we're giving a rating to someone else, we tend to attribute employees' poor performance to their internal characteristics. The halo effect, so we tend to fail to distinguish between different dimensions of performance to be evaluated. In other words, we tend to evaluate on an overall impression of an employee. If they exceed in something, we tend to give high rating in other unrelated fields. Um, Sample size error is one that I've often seen as well, which is we tend to compare employees' performance from the same standpoints, whether they've been in the company doing the job for 1 year or if they have 5 years of experience, we tend to rate them from that same standpoint. And then stereotypes. So we're talking about, gender, race, beauty, and so on. Did you know that we tend to rate higher someone who is attractive, for instance? So just be very, very aware of all those biases and those common errors that, might play when you are evaluating someone. There's a really good LinkedIn course about biases. So if you have access to LinkedIn Learning, I would advise you to have a look at the course. So now that we've spent a bit of time looking at those formal reviews and appraisals and ratings and biases and so on, I want to talk about potential and performance. Usually in organizations, performance management is linked to talent management, and performance management plays a part in identifying top talents, high potential individuals to feed and to strengthen the talent pipeline. So usually high performance is really easy to spot, especially if you're doing a great job at performance management and you're using a bell curve fourth system, because it forces you to identify your top talents or your top performers, shall I say. So high performers are very, very easy to identify because they are the type of people who constantly exceed expectations. They are the go-to people for difficult projects because they have an excellent track record of getting things done and getting things solved. High performers, however, might not have the potential and the desire to succeed in a higher level role or to tackle more advanced work. Okay, and potential is very, very difficult to identify. And it's the word potential is in itself a high level concept, and most organizations will define it as potential for advancement at a higher level or a broader role. Defining potential can be subjective, and that's why potential is often based on key attributes and behaviors that are valued by an organization, and those tend to be associated with those characteristics which I have on the screen here, which are learning capabilities and agility, attitude to change, adjustment, ambition, emotional intelligence. So selection for high potential individuals to secure the talent pipeline is a multi-step process, and you as a manager might be involved in that process. So as a leader, you might be involved in the talent identification process, which usually happens in Q4. And this is likely to involve two things: plotting your team members in a talent grid. So usually most organizations use a 9-box, 6-box, 16-box, 20-box grid, and also participating in departmental reviews to defend your inputs. And those are the two things that as a manager, as a middle manager, you might be asked to do within talent management. And that's where it's very, very important for you to understand what's in place in your organization for talent management. So if you are involved in the talent identification process, just make sure you ask your HRBP or your organizational development business partner to be trained so that you know exactly what is expected of you, and that you know exactly your specific talent selection process. Um, it's important that you do that because if you are participating in departmental reviews, you will need to voice and you will need to fight for your people, for their place. If you are not involved in the talent selection process, as a manager, it is good practice to familiarize yourself with, for instance, this 9-box grid, to get a snapshot of your team and yourself, of where you might be on the grid. And this will help you plan the development for the following year, to encourage successful team and individual development. So usually, I mean, if you are involved and you're doing those two things, then there's more to selecting high potential individuals than just putting people in those boxes. Usually, organizational development will take over with a battery of assessments. So they will do like 360 assessments. They will run a personality assessment, one of the leading ones being the organ assessment suite. They will conduct some logic and reasoning testing. They will conduct talent interviews, all of that prior to selecting their high potentials. Yeah, so it's really, really important for you to understand all of that. So in summary, this is the end of this short presentation. So what we covered was, as a manager, what you really, really need to know is to understand your performance management system inside out. Really understand the rating systems and your vignettes. You need to manage and you need to be able to document the informal performance management cycle, because that will help you a lot for the formal reviews. Then we looked at the formal reviews and I gave you a very simple format to follow for your reviews. And then we looked at biases and errors. And finally, we touched on performance versus potential. So this is me. For today, I'm done. Those are my contact details, and I just want you to keep an eye on the website, as I will soon be publishing a toolkit on developing leadership skills through the performance management cycles, where all the worksheets that I have mentioned in all the previous webinars will be available to download. That's it for me now. Thank you for watching.